As the dust settles after a disappointing result from an encouraging performance at St James's Park, I'll be discussing what I've learned from Tottenham's 2-1 defeat to Newcastle United and why I'd rather be a Spurs fan right now than a Manchester United supporter. Meanwhile, more Premier League transfer stories slip out after Friday's deadline, including how Liverpool had a late look at a deal for a world-class striker from Italy, and more on how Chelsea's owners tried to do a deal with themselves once again. All this and more on today's episode of Daily Premier League News with me, Barnaby Slater. Guys, thank you so much for watching and for all your support. Please do press that like button. It really helps the video get up the algorithm and seen by more people. And also, if you're not already a subscriber, please do subscribe to the channel for all daily content coming into your YouTube accounts. Also, you can be a member, only £1 a month. All the details in the description box below. But let's get started. And I want to start with the 5 things, or kind of 7 or 8 things, that I feel like I've learned from yesterday's Newcastle 2, Spurs 1 Premier League defeat. And I want to start with a little bit of positivity. Of course, that is a huge improvement from Tottenham on the last 2 seasons against Newcastle at St James's Park. 6-0 the previous season, or 6-1, and 4-0 last season. 10 goals conceded in 2 away games. And let's face it, yesterday we were so much stronger defensively. I know that everyone is very angry about the goal that we conceded, and rightly so. But we actually only gave up 3 shots on goal during the entire game. And yes, that was a bad last goal to give away, the second goal in the 2-1 win. And you could have driven a bus through those gaps. But what I would say is, actually, if Radu Dragushin had played more games for Spurs, started more games for Spurs, and I'm not suggesting he should have, because I think rightly Van de Ven and Romero are the mainstays of that central defence. But if he'd started more games for Spurs and he was up with the rhythm of that back four, if you freeze frame at the exact moment that Joe Linton plays that through ball, then actually it's Dragushin who has just dropped off a yard from the other 3. The other 3 are absolutely in a line, and Jacob Murphy would have been caught offside had Dragushin not just dropped a yard. And the reason he dropped a yard was because he was afraid that the ball was going to be played his side into Alexander Isak straight away. And he was feared of that, and he feared the pace that Isak had over him, and therefore he dropped a yard just in fear. And I get it. I understand why he would. But I would say that with Mickey van der Ven in place, that goal would not have been conceded. And I think we would have got at least a draw and possibly gone on to win the game, just based on the kind of pace that he has and the ability that he has to play that high line. Now, that is a positive spin on it. However, I do understand that you can also look negatively at this and say, we do not have a direct backup for Mickey van der Ven. We do not have a player with his natural pace. I would argue, in fact, there isn't a player in world football who plays centre-half and has the natural pace that Van der Ven has, and therefore he is almost the absolute perfect centre-half to play in Ange's system. So, is there then a little bit of blame to be thrown at the recruitment team for not finding someone who is absolutely perfect for that, or is there blame to be shown at Big Ange Postecoglou and the coaching team for not saying to the defence, when we haven't got Van der Ven, you have to be maybe 2 or 3 yards deeper as a 4, not just one of you. So there are arguments both sides. I understand that, but I do think defensively we were so much better than we have been at St James's Park the last couple of years, and it was just that little lapse of concentration that led to us losing that second goal. I have to say, I think the first goal in general, it's just a great finish, isn't it? We got into so many positions similarly to the way that Lloyd Kelly did for that first goal, to the byline, and we were always putting it across the front of the box, across the 6-yard box, and there was no number 9 there to finish it off. When Solanke is fit, or when Richarlison is fit, you would back there to be one of our number 9s to finish that off. However, what Lloyd Kelly did correctly was he cut it back, and it just so happened that Harvey Barnes made his late run into the box and was free, and it was a brilliant finish. Sometimes you just got to give props for good finishes. That was a great finish, and as a result, they scored 2 and we lost the game. We were not clinical with the opportunities that we had, most of which were kind of 3-on-3s and 4-on-4s, breaking forward, where you just need that final ball to be perfect. And unfortunately, since the days of Harry Kane and Son Heung-min playing together, when both of their final balls were exemplary, and that's why they set each other up with so many goals, we're just not quite there yet with our decision-making in that final third. And that's what we really need to improve on. And I'm looking really at James Maddison and Deki Kulusevski. They need to be the players who really take the take the game by the scruff of the neck and say, we're going to be the ones who are going to put the perfect final ball in. There was a great example, wasn't there, I think, in the second half there, where Kulusevski had the ball at his feet, he had space in midfield, and he tried to lace through a perfectly weighted through ball to Son Heung-min, but Dan Burn just got on the end of it with his long legs, and it just needed a little bit more weight on it, and if it had, then Son Heung-min would have been absolutely through on goal, similar to the way that Jacob Murphy was for Newcastle. So it's little percentage points, it's things here or there, but don't forget, Newcastle, St James's Park, one of the hardest places to go to in the Premier League. I've been getting a fair bit of stick on Twitter for being a Daniel Levy sympathiser, a happy clapper, because I'm choosing to think that yesterday was a good performance, an unfortunate result. But not many teams go to St James's Park and win. That is just a fact, certainly since the Saudis have come in. And other teams around us, top 4, top 5 teams, other teams around us will lose there this season as well. And it's just unfortunate because we did play really, really well, I thought. And it was just unlucky, really. I wanted to mention a bit more about Dragusin as something I felt I learned. Not just in a negative way. I've said he lapsed concentration a little bit there. Thought that was unfortunate. But in terms of the first performance that I've seen from him as the right of the 2 centre-halves, because last season, as I remember it anyway, and let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but as I remember it, whenever he came in for Van der Ven last season, he started on the left, and he looked to me just a little bit cumbersome on his left foot when trying to play out the ball out to the left-sided defender or into midfield. But yesterday, he played Romero on the left and Dragusin on the right, and he looked so much more comfortable on the ball for me. He's also brilliant in the air, as we know, and he's a fighter and a leader. There's one particular part I remember in central midfield, I think in the second half, where he just battled for everything and won an important foul because he was stronger. And I think he's an excellent purchase. I really think he's going to be brilliant for Spurs in the long term. I hate to say this, but there's already been talk, hasn't there, about Christian Romero interesting Real Madrid, and I could see that possibly happening in a year or two's time. And when that happens, Dragusin, I think, slots in perfectly for Romero. And I think his ball play, that his ability on the ball to find passes in between the lines that Romero does so perfectly, I think that will only improve over time for Dragusin as well. So, I thought he was impressive yesterday. I would give him a strong 7 out of 10, just that little lapse of concentration for their goal. I think he'll learn that if he has to play more games, or when he plays more games for Spurs. He will learn how important it is to be absolutely at one level with the rest of his back four. For those of you old enough, George Graham's back four for Arsenal, where he used to literally coach them by having a piece of rope tied in between them so they were always absolutely level with each other. And I was actually impressed with the way that Udogie, Romero and Porro were all in a line most of yesterday, but it was just that one lapse of concentration from Dragusin. But he did impress me totally in terms of the rest of the game. Another thing I felt I learned yesterday, the set pieces, attacking and defensive, the bane of my life for Spurs over the last year or so, have improved so much. And credit has to go, I think, to the new members of the coaching staff who've come in this summer, because I think Ange has maybe taken things off Jedinak and Mason a little bit and brought these new members of the coaching staff in, and they are clearly doing a lot of work on the attacking and defensive set pieces. It was far more impressive yesterday, trying lots of different things attacking-wise, which was good to see, and made some really good chances that way. And of course, we scored one last week against Everton, didn't we, with Romero's header? But also defensively, we were challenging for balls more. I didn't feel like they had many gilt-edge free header chances, which I feel like we give up in most of the games, or have been giving up in most of the games over the past year or so. So, I don't want to jinx it, but I was far more impressed with that. I mentioned a little bit in terms of another thing I felt I learned. Obviously, we missed Solanke and Richarlison yesterday, and that's why Deki Kulusevski started in the false 9. I was expecting him to start on the right with Odegaard on the left and Sonny down the middle, but Deki started in the false 9, and he worked hard, didn't he? He always works hard and puts in a shift, but I felt much more comfortable with Kulusevski, when Big Ange Postecoglou made his change at half-time to bring in Brennan Johnson on the right and bring Kulusevski into a second creator role in midfield. I feel like he's a much more natural fit there. I like the way that him and Maddison pair up together, and that will work well, I think, against all the teams who certainly come to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and play kind of 10-11 behind the ball. Newcastle were doing that yesterday, and we were 1-0 down, so it was the right decision. But I feel like we missed Solanke and we missed Richarlison, and hopefully this international break will give them a chance to get properly fit before the North London derby. I also, another thing I feel like I learned and wanted to talk about, Brennan Johnson, I genuinely think is a genuinely brilliant impact substitute. It's where he does most of his good work. He looked more confident yesterday, and I think that's just because he saw so many spaces that he could drive into. Johnson's game is all about instinct. It's not technical, really. It's about getting the ball out of his feet, looking up, scanning, and then getting those crosses across the box, which he's brilliant at. He's a brilliant crosser. And then secondly, getting in at the far post when the opposing forward is doing the same thing from the left. They're the things that Johnson is brilliant at. And those things are much easier, and there's much more room for him to do them in the second half when he can be an impact substitute and there's more space in the game. I thought he was excellent yesterday, and I really hope that does wonders for his confidence, because I felt for him against Everton where he was just trying lots of stuff and it wasn't coming off. And I hope that going forward, Johnson is kind of kept as a bit of an impact substitute and he can really make the most of those spaces in the games in the second half. Another thing I just wanted to talk about, because like I said, there's been a fair bit of negativity amongst the Spurs fans, particularly on Twitter, and maybe there will be in my comments as well, and that's absolutely fine. Please do comment and we'll have a little chat about it. Like I always say, football is subjective, so everybody's opinion is valid. But I just wanted to talk about a little bit how much happier I am watching performances like yesterday, where yes, we lost 2-1, but then I was when we were playing Conte ball. And I get it, the beginning of Antonio Conte's spell was good and the players were all into it and we were tight at the back and hitting teams on the break, and it was a great kind of last few months of that first season. But once Conte had kind of almost ground those players' minds completely by overtraining them and shouting at them too much, and they weren't able or willing to give 100%, all it became under Conte was just defensive stodge. And look, I know we lost yesterday, but I'm just so much happier with us having possession and control of games and making chances. And yeah, our decision making in the final third isn't great at the moment, but that will come. We're a little bit rusty at the beginning of the season. I think that will come. And it's just so much more pleasing knowing that going forward, other fans love watching Spurs play. Other fans of clubs love talking about Ange Postecoglou and what they like about him. And other fans just think that Tottenham are on the way forward and are growing. And I agree. I think it's a project that we just have to remain patient with. I know it's difficult. I know we only got a draw at Leicester and we lost yesterday. But the results will come. We are doing it. It's happening. Ange Ball is coming. The players are really starting to buy into it. And I genuinely believe if we can just get our players fit, Solanke and Van der Ven, for these big games, for the North London derby, then we can really get a statement result soon, and I hope it'll be in the next game. I really do. Finally, in terms of things we learned, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to say, you think, for any of you who are feeling a bit negative today, you think things are bad for us, look at Manchester United. No results this season, no style, no identity, more and more money spent for a manager who doesn't have the faith of either the fans, the board, or seemingly the players. They've gone down another dead end this season, at which they're going to have to sack Ten Hag probably before Christmas, I would think, if they get any kind of more bad results. That's the reality, and it's as simple as this. If we'd gone to Newcastle yesterday, Spurs I mean, and we put in a performance like Manchester United did at home against their biggest rivals, you know, there'd be absolute outrage, whereas Spurs are on a project with a style of play and a way of doing things that you know is all pointing in the right direction. That's how I feel about it anyway. But with Manchester United, it's like one step forward, 4 steps back every single time. And there was an argument yesterday, wasn't there, on Sky Sports between Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, where Jamie Carragher, in my opinion, rightly said, you know, they looked to replace Eric Ten Hag and they bottled it. And Gary Neville was fighting against that. And Gary Neville admitted, yeah, they spoke to other managers. Well, why is Ten Hag still there? Surely the only reason Ten Hag is still there is because he knows that if he were to resign out of pride, he wouldn't get his contract paid up. But he knows they've spoken to other managers and they didn't find anyone that they thought was good enough. I don't know. It all sits wrong, and it's just a recipe for disaster at Old Trafford, and I'm so much more pleased that I'm a Spurs fan right now than a Manchester United fan. Now, a lot of Man United fans would say, I'm sure, and maybe a lot of Spurs fans would say, well, Man United won the FA Cup last year, and that's true. They've won trophies, and that's Ten Hag's argument as well. But just look at Manchester United fans, a lot of them. They're like, it's not enough for them. And yeah, I want Spurs to win trophies, but I also want us to build properly. The way that the club is building in terms of growing through infrastructure, I want us to build on the pitch too, to a possible crescendo of actually winning one of the massive trophies, the Champions League or the Premier League. And I think Ange Postecoglou is putting in place a project that when Pep Guardiola leaves Manchester City, or something bad happens to Manchester City because of the charges they've got against them, that we can at that moment be fighting with Liverpool and Arsenal, and I think it'll be Liverpool and Arsenal, to take advantage and maybe win the Premier League. I know it's big talk. I understand that a lot of you will be angry at me for saying it, but that is what I think is going on at Tottenham Hotspur. That is why we are buying young players, young, talented, exciting players, but not too many of them all at once, like Chelsea are doing, but trusting in Ange Postecoglou in building a team and a squad that can challenge at that moment. That's what I think anyway. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you completely disagree or if you agree, and we'll have a little chat about it. Anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit now about what Ange Postecoglou said after yesterday's Newcastle game. Ali Gold asked him some questions in the press conference, and Ange said this. Yeah, obviously, we should have got something from the game. Very similar, I guess, to our first away game when we controlled it for the most part, nullified most of the threats that Newcastle have. It's obviously a difficult opponent here at St James's Park. The crowd create a pretty strong atmosphere for the home side. Little things go their way, but I thought for the most part we handled that really well. Then we gained the ascendancy in the game and we just needed to kill it off, and we didn't, and it was a disappointing second goal. I thought we switched off a little bit, but the game should have been well over by then. So, another sore one, unfortunately, where we haven't got the rewards for our play, but ultimately it's 3 strong performances from the first 3 games. The results don't reflect it that way. Do you agree with Big Ange Postecoglou on that, or do you think he's trying to put a positive spin on it? I actually do agree with it. I'm feeling, certainly today, a lot more glass half full. And I agree, certainly the first 60 minutes against Leicester, all of the Everton game, and then most of the game yesterday, other than maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes, I thought Newcastle were a little bit on top, and then a little 5-10 minute spell in the middle of the second half. But apart from that, Spurs absolutely in the ascendancy, and we should have scored 3 or 4 goals. I totally believe that. And I don't think Ange is just trying to put a positive spin on it in the press. That is exactly how I read the game too. He was also Ange was also asked whether he felt that Spurs missed having a natural striker to get into the right positions today to finish off some of those possibilities. And he said this. He said, yeah, potentially, but I still think even outside of that, we just had some really good opportunities. A little bit more composure needed. Fair play to Nick Pope. I thought he had an outstanding game, but I thought we could have tested him a few more times with just some better decision making. Exactly. It's not just the opportunities we did create. I thought there was another probably 6 to 10 moments where we could have created even more opportunities. That's been a constant theme for us and what we're trying to break through. Exactly what I said, isn't it, in terms of things that I felt I learned from the game. Ange talked about it as well. It's almost like the opportunities before the opportunities are the problem. The decision-making before the final ball has got to be better, and sometimes also the final ball and the final shot as well. But sometimes it's almost like, because we win the ball so high up the pitch, we find ourselves in so much space in midfield that sometimes the players panic. There was definitely one with Odebear yesterday where we had the ball, won it high up the pitch. He's running in towards the 18-yard line. Sonny makes a run to his left, and what Odebear has to do is a little reverse pass, but instead he tries to shoot, and it's blocked off. These things will come. I really do think they'll come with the chemistry that the players build together, and while some of them kind of just get a little bit more mature. But I understand that that will frustrate a number of you who will say, you know, it's been 20 years, 25 years of project, but this is the painful rebuild. I'm sorry, this is the painful rebuild that Maurizio Pochettino talked about, and we just have to live through it. And I think the good thing about this painful rebuild is we're living through it with a positive manager, front foot football, possession football, Tottenham style, daring football. And it could be a lot worse if we were living through this painful rebuild and we had a negative manager. Postecoglou was also asked about Radu Dragic. He said this: I thought he was good, Radu. It was a great opportunity to expose him. I mean, he's only 22. He's still a young man, especially for a defender. And I thought exposing him to this atmosphere and the particular threat that Newcastle posed with Isak up front, he had to be really concentrated, and I thought he was. I think he's going to play a big part in our season. Him coming through that, the whole experience will set him up well. Yeah, completely agree. Like I said before, Dragic impressed me yesterday. And really comfortable with him on the right side of the 2 centre-halves as well. Just wanted to bring you some more positivity, really, because, you know, I think it's easy after a defeat to just look for the negatives and things. But I've mentioned him before, and I've actually had him as an interviewee on this channel before, and I'll try and get him on again. But Harry Brooks, who's a brilliant youth coach, and I love some of his takes on football. Go and follow him on Twitter, at @HarryBrooks_coach. That's at @HBrooks_coach. That's at @HBrooks_coach. But he did a great thread on Twitter yesterday about some positives to look on with Spurs, and I wanted to, read them to you because I really love his take. So he said the following. He said, in terms of the setup at Spurs, it's further ahead than I expected them to be at this stage. The way they're coached, as long as the profile of the players are there, they can open up teams at a low block with 2 ball players as the 8s in Maddison and Kulu, as we did in the second half yesterday. They can hit teams quickly on transition too. The pressing is largely good, and they're getting hit on the counter way less, and defending set pieces as well as attacking them has been impressive so far this season. Of course, there are more elements, but broadly, the coaching and setup is superb. The issue in the 2 away games has been the brittleness and lack of variety of some of the forwards in crucial moments. Kulu going central alongside Maddison, with Johnson stretching it on the right, changed the game in the second half. But due to setup, in terms of profile, it's also why Spurs didn't take advantage of the domination. For example, Johnson would only ever look to play the ball across, no matter what. Odegaard looks very talented, he's a great signing, and he will get there, but cannot be relied upon in terms of consistent end product yet. And it's in those crucial moments where the top teams have the killers, and Spurs only have one, by which I think he means Son Heung-min. Simply, better/more trusted players in the final third, and Spurs would have 9 out of 9 points. I completely agree with that, and I'm sure a lot of you would agree as well when you're talking about one of the issues being that Tottenham needed to buy some killers, like maybe an Eberechi Eze or whatever, but I'm hopeful that Dominic Solanke will be one of those killers too. Harry goes on, he said, what does have to happen is any team that looks to be deep block or mid block versus Spurs, you have to have 2 ball players as the 8s, because when Decky went central, that's when the game opened up for Spurs. Odegaard and Johnson stretching Newcastle out, now an extra player who can play close combination play centrally. Well, I think we've learned that from the Everton game and yesterday, haven't we? When we're playing teams who sit 11 behind the ball, then we have to have those 2 8s. We didn't do it enough last season, and I really like the way, as I said earlier in the episode, I really like the way that Kulusevski and Maddison play that together. Harry goes on, he says, that should be the ideal for 80% or more of the games that Spurs play, and if they truly go for it and can sign a top-tier forward who is a killer, rather than relying on Odegaard, better options to push Udogie and Van der Ven, cover for Vicario too, then Spurs can and will compete. And he means at the top. I considered a lot of different options that are very good and make sense, but truth be told, Spurs should be looking to go and break the bank now for the difference-making wide forward. It should have been Jadon Sancho. You can also rely on his quality on the ball in crucial moments. It now has to be Kvaratskhelia or Mbeumo, or players of that quality. Simply put, if Spurs want to push on, they have to sign that one undeniable forward. Of course, you can think longer term, go cheaper and it work out, but I'd be going for proven quality needle movers. It will likely cost £80 million plus. So I think a lot of positive stuff there from Harry Brooks in terms of how well Spurs are doing now, and that being better than where he thought we'd be under just 18 months with Ange, but also some brute honesty, some transparency from Brooks in that he's saying what Tottenham need to do next is sign players who will improve the first team in that wide forward role straight away. An Eze, someone like that. I keep going back to Eze. Even though he's more of an 8 than a wide player maybe, but he can play wide. He certainly was brought on wide for England in the summer. But players who you know are going to get you off their feet because you know they're going to either assist or score maybe 40, 50% of the time when they're put in really good positions, whereas someone like Odegaard and Johnson, they're young and they're raw, and so you're not going to get the finished article yet. I agree with Harry Brooks on that. Like I said though, make sure you go and follow Harry Brooks. He's brilliant. It is at @hbrooks_coach. Really great stuff from him every single day. Some more Spurs news now. Mickey van der Ven has withdrawn from the Dutch squad for the upcoming international break due to that injury that he suffered against Everton that kept him out of the Newcastle game. I'm really hopeful that is... it feels to me that is a wise decision. I'm really happy with that decision, and I really hope that means he is available for the North London derby at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in a couple of weeks' time. I haven't done a video since the Europa League draw, which was on Friday. That draw is as follows in terms of when the fixtures are. I did tell you what the draw was, but the fixtures have been announced and when they are. So we start off with a home game against Karabag, which you'd think should be 3 points. Ferencváros away next. That should be one of the easier away games, so hopefully 6 points there. And then AZ, Alkmaar, Troy Parrott's team at home, third. That should be another 3 points for me, so I'm going 9 points out of 9 for the first 3 games. They are on the 26th of September, 3rd of October and 24th of October. Then on the 7th of November, we have what I think is possibly our hardest away game, Galatasaray away. Welcome to hell. So a point at best there, so I'm saying 10 points out of the first 4 games. Roma at home, 28th of November. I'm going to go for that being a big atmosphere game. Italian club at home, Mourinho's ex-club as well, so I'm going for 3 points there. That leads us 12 points after 5 games. Rangers away, Ibrox, 12th of December. They'll be massively up for that. Ange Postecoglou returning to Glasgow, so I'm going to go for a point away there. So that's what, 3, 6, 9, 10, 13. I'm going, anyway, a point there. My maths has gone. And then Hoffenheim away will be difficult. A point there, and then finish off those 2 games, 12th of December for Rangers, 23rd of January for Hoffenheim, and then finish off 30th of January, Elfsborg at home, 3 points. An unbeaten group stage I'm going for, and Spurs to top the whole league of the Europa League as we go into the knockout round straight away. That's what I think is going to happen. Moving on, Sergio Reguilon, the only player really who Spurs had told was surplus to requirements and needed to leave the club, who hasn't left the club. He's exploring the possibility of completing a transfer to a club in either Portugal, Saudi Arabia or Turkey, because the transfer deadlines are still open. The transfer windows are still open there. He's not part of Spurs' squad for the upcoming season, but no formal offers are on the table. And I think what he's probably hoping for is that Daniel Levy will do with him what he did with Aurier and Ndombele and kind of rip up the contract and pay him off. But I think Levy still feels, after Reguilon's half-decent loan spells last year at Manchester United and Brentford, that maybe an offer will come in of around £5 to £8 million. It's amazing how far Reguilon's career has dropped off a cliff, but it happens. Good guy, but just not suited to Ange Postecoglou's formation, and I hope he gets a good move somewhere. Meanwhile, in case you missed it at the weekend, of course, with the North London derby coming up, Declan Rice was sent off for Arsenal for 2 bookable offences, so he will miss the North London derby. So, that could be a little positive for Spurs. Let's see what happens. Want to do a quick loan update. Spurs' players on loan. I don't know if you saw this, but it was very sweet. Alejo Valise, who's been getting starts for Espanyol, he cried in a television interview after he scored the 96th minute winner for Espanyol against Rayo Vallecano, his first goal in Spanish football. 2-1 win for Espanyol. And it was so sweet in the interview. Go and check it out if you haven't. He's talking Spanish, but it doesn't really matter because he's crying his eyes out. And hopefully that goal will raise his confidence and push him on to score more goals for Espanyol. And then we can bring him back to Spurs and have yet another striker on the books who can push Dominic Solanke and Richarlison if he stays at the club longer term. Manor Solomon made his debut for Leeds in a 2-0 home win against Hull. He provided the assist for the first goal. That was in about the 55th, 60th minute. He created 2 other chances and had 1 big chance himself. 1 shot on target, 1 shot that was blocked, 4 touches in the opposition box, and made 2 passes into the final third. So a great debut for Manor Solomon. I've seen the assist, gets down the outside on the left, it's pretty Ange ball, whips in a great cross with his left foot, which you don't expect much from Manor Solomon. He's more someone to cut in off the left and cross with his right foot, but that's a good start for him at Leeds. Dane Scarlett, unfortunately an unused sub as Oxford United beat Preston 3-1. I fear for Dane Scarlett if he's not even getting game time at Oxford. George Abbott made his debut for Notts County as they beat Swindon 2-1. He came off the bench in the 82nd minute, 7 touches, 5 accurate passes, 1 into the final third. Jamie Donnelly played the full 90 minutes for Leyton Orient in a 3-0 away defeat at Shrewsbury. He had 1 shot that was blocked, completed 36 accurate passes, 67 touches, 3 in the opposition box, 3 passes into the final third. He took 2 corners and made 2 clearances. So clearly Jamie Donnelly is an important player for Leyton Orient as well. For Leyton Orient already, but unfortunately a bad defeat for them. Matthew Craig played the full 90 minutes as Barnsley beat Crawley 3-0 away. That's good for him. And Ashley Phillips played the first 74 minutes for Stoke in a 1-0 away win at Plymouth. He was the most fouled player in the game with 4 fouls against him, completed 32 accurate passes, 51 touches of the ball total, and made 2 passes into the final third and 7 clearances. So that's good. A good start for Ashley Phillips there at Stoke. Before I go into just a roundup of the other Premier League news with some transfer stories kind of leaking over from the end of the transfer deadline, please do press that like button on here if you haven't already. Please do subscribe, and if you're already a subscriber and you have other Spurs fans or other Premier League fans, please do let them know about the channel if you think they'll like it. Trying to grow, just about to hit 11,000 subscribers. Want to get towards 15,000 subscribers as quickly as possible. And like I said, if you want to help support me make this daily content, I really appreciate it. Only £1 a month. You can become a member. All the details in the description box below. Let's start though at the club where I said at the beginning of this episode I'd rather be a Spurs fan than a Man United fan. Well, Man United, they're still and were still doing deals or attempting to do deals into the late hours of Friday, and they rejected loan bids from Real Betis for both Antony and Christian Eriksen on transfer deadline day. Meanwhile, as recruitment teams start to kind of look ahead to the January window already, transfer window is something that never really stops despite the fact you can't buy anyone. They apparently, Manchester United, are looking to sign Fulham's fullback Anthony Robinson, and they're looking to pay around £30 million. Over at Anfield, Liverpool explored the possibility late in the window of signing Napoli's Nigerian international striker Victor Osimhen, but it was his huge salary demands that put them off. That's according to Corriere dello Sport in Italy. Really, the fact that Osimhen didn't leave Napoli in the window is incredible to me. Obviously, he still has a chance to go to Saudi Arabia, but he's 27. He's in his prime. He should have just lowered his salary demands to get a move to England. I think that's what put off a lot of clubs. It just showed that, is he more interested in the money, or is he interested in showing himself as a genuine world-class forward? And that's why he's still at Napoli, and Antonio Conte has said that he will not play for that first team. Meanwhile, looking ahead once again at Anfield, Liverpool will move apparently for Crystal Palace and England defender Mark Guéhi next summer. They're willing to wait in a similar way to they did with Virgil van Dijk, and that will upset Newcastle, who tried so hard to get Guéhi this summer, but Palace knocked them back over and over again because they wouldn't reach their demands, which I think was about £70 million, with a lot of it being paid up front, and they weren't willing to do that. Meanwhile, at Newcastle, having failed with bids for Guéhi on deadline day, they were also unsuccessful with a £35 million approach for Forest and Sweden winger and ex-Manchester United player Anthony Elanga. Meanwhile, Kieran Trippier might well head to one of several interested clubs in Saudi Arabia whilst their transfer window is still open. He didn't play yesterday against Spurs with Tino Livramento starting ahead of him, and I thought he played pretty well, Livramento. And the 33-year-old former England defender Kieran Trippier, who just retired from international football last week, he is keen to leave the North East. That is according to your very reputable Sun. Meanwhile, TalkSport, who ironically are owned by the same man as the Sun, have dismissed suggestions that Trippier wants to leave the club and move to Saudi Arabia or Turkey. So watch this space. But my hunch, my instinct is that Trippier will probably move to Saudi Arabia. On deadline day, of course, Chelsea got Jadon Sancho into the club, one of now 600 wide forwards that they have. Sancho said the following: "I'm really excited to be here. London is where I grew up and I'm happy to be back. The manager spoke to me about the project, and for a young player, it's exciting. Hopefully I can bring goals and assists to the bridge. I wanted to join Chelsea because it is an iconic club. My idols growing up were Didier Drogba and Frank Lampard, and now I have the opportunity to play for this club like them. It's a great feeling." I mean, call me cynical, but I think he's probably talking bollocks. He grew up in Manchester. He's a Man City fan, as far as I'm aware, Man United fan, certainly. So I don't think his idols were Drogba and Lampard. That's a little bit of the Robbie Keanes about him there, where, if you remember Robbie Keane, every time he signed for a new club, he said he supported them as a boy. I think Sancho's doing a little bit of Keane work there. Meanwhile, staying at Chelsea, the £16.8 million potential sale of their striker David Washington, didn't even know he played for the club, to Strasbourg collapsed at the last minute after fears that the move would be investigated because both clubs are owned by Blueco, which is Todd Bowley's company. Once again, Chelsea trying to sell a player to themselves, doing the dirty. I just so hope and pray that this catches up with them further down the line. Over at Brentford, Ivan Toney did get his move to Saudi Arabia, and apparently he will earn £403,000 per week, the equivalent of £800,000 a week in the UK, because there's no tax to be paid on it in Saudi Arabia after moving to Al Ahly from Brentford. If you saw at the weekend, he was actually, and I thought it was quite nice of him, he was in the crowd at Brentford for their game despite the fact he made his move the day before. And finally, over to South London with Arsenal, Raheem Sterling made his move there, and it is believed that deal was agreed with Chelsea, where Chelsea will cover over half of his wages despite the fact that he's moved to one of their great rivals, Arsenal. And this, to me, shows why Chelsea and Arsenal are pathetic little clubs, selling players to each other back and forth all the time, even though they will then, get points that will count against the club that they've been sold by. But anyway, there is no obligation to buy or a loan fee, apparently. So Arsenal, I think, have got a pretty good deal on that front. Okay, guys, that's the end of today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do press that like button if you haven't done already. Please do subscribe. And like I said, become a member, only £1 a month. All the details in the description box below. Have a great rest of your Monday. Cheers.